Hey everyone, welcome back. This is lesson 5-4, completing the square. The objectives for today, you're going to be able to solve quadratic equations by completing the square, and you're going to be able to write quadratic equations in vertex form. Your vocabulary for today is completing the square. All right, many quadratic equations contain expressions that cannot be easily factored. For equations containing these types of expressions, you can use square roots to find roots. First, let's consider the square root property. To solve a quadratic equation, you can take the square root of both sides. Be sure to consider the positive and negative square roots. Okay, so let's just talk about this for a minute. When we see this, it's just read as plus or minus square root of a number. So let's see what this actually means. I'm going to start out with a little bit easier example. I'm going to start out with x squared equals 16. So if we're trying to solve an equation, we have our ultimate goal is going to be to say x equals some constant. All right, but in this case, I have x squared equals a constant, but that's not x by itself. So what I want to remember is that x squared is really just x times x. All right, so what I actually know is x times x equals 16. All right, well, if I put it under the radical, if I square both sides, now I have two numbers under my radical, so I can say that that just equals x. And square root of 16, we know, is equal to the square root of 4 times 4. I have two 4's in there, so I can take one of those out. And so I end up with x equals 4, which is what my ultimate goal is to get x by itself. So if I square both sides, then I can get my x squared to turn to just plain x, which is what I want. Now, it could have also been, I know that 4 times 4 equals 16, and I also know that negative 4 times negative 4 is also positive 16. So either one of those could be true. So actually, it's going to be x equals plus or minus 4 in this case. All right, so let's look back over here at this example. So I want you to see, if you come up with x squared equals 15, we can put the square root of both of those, take the square root of x squared and a square root of 15, and that is the same as saying x equals plus or minus the square root of 15. So this is going to be very helpful for you to know that in a little bit. So let's try a few examples here. So first of all, it says, let's solve this equation using the square root property. So to solve this equation, the first thing I want to do is subtract 11 from both sides. So subtract 11 from both sides, because remember, my ultimate goal is to be able to say x equals something. When my question says to solve the equation, I want to end up saying x equals something. So I'm going to subtract from both sides, and that leaves me 48. So now I have 4x squared equals 48. Okay, so there it is. I'm going to just erase my work now that you've seen it. So again, I haven't quite gotten to where I have my x equals yet. I still have a 4 connected to this x squared. So the next thing I want to do is go ahead and divide both sides by 4. All right. And that's going to give me x squared equals 12. Again, I'm not quite there. I want it to be x equals, but I've got the x squared. So now you know what we need to do. We're going to take the square root of both sides. So we're going to just do this on both sides. And there it is. And we end up with, notice it's plus or minus square root of 12. Now you may think we're completely finished, but we're not. Okay, because square root of 12 is not in its lowest form, because there's a 4 inside there, 4 times 3. So we have a square root of 4 times the square root of 3, and square root of 4 is actually plus or minus 2 times the square root of 3. Okay, and I don't know that the video is going to, you'll be able to see this bottom line. That's why I wrote it up here. Okay, so x equals plus or minus 2 times the square root of 3. Let's try another example. Or actually, you can check your answers using your graphing calculator. You put in 2 square root of 3 for your x, and it'll solve and get us 59, which is what we wanted. Okay, let's try this example. It says solve the equation. Remember, our ultimate goal is to get it to say x equals something. All right, so that's our final goal, x equals something. So first of all, let's just look at this and see if we can actually factor it out, because the first thing we want to do is try and factor it out. So I always take my c term, which is 36, make a big X here, and I take my b term, which is 12. I'm looking for factors of 36 that multiply together to get 36, add together to get 12. So I'm going to just kind of work through my factors of 36. You probably see it already, but I'm just going to do it for anyway. So I have 1 times 36. They multiply together to get 36, but they don't add together to get 12. So I'm going to try 2 times 18. Multiply together to get 36, but they don't add together to get 12. 3 times 12, nope. 4 times 9, they add together to get 13, but not 12. 6 times 6, aha, they do. So I've got a 6 and a 6. So in order to factor that, I'm going to say x and an x, and then I'm going to put my plus 6 plus 6. So what that's actually going to look like is x plus 6 squared equals 28. Okay. So I do have an x, but it's snuggled up inside parentheses, squared. So I'm going to have to do something to get rid of this little square here so I can go ahead and solve. So let's remember our square root. We can take the square root of both sides. So if I do this, I'm going to end up with, once I square them, I'll end up with x plus 6 equals plus or minus square root of 28. Okay, so we still haven't reached my final goal. My final goal, remember, is x equals something. Okay, so what I need to do is go ahead and subtract our 6 from both sides. Minus 6, minus 6. All right, subtract 6 from both sides, and we end up with x equals negative 6 plus or minus square root of 28. Now, let's remember that square root of 28 is actually made up of square root of 4 times square root of 7. Okay, and now we know that square root of 4 is the same as 2. All right, so we have to simplify, and so what we're going to do when we simplify is we're going to end up saying that our answer is x equals negative 6. In case y'all can't see it, I'm going to write it over here. X equals negative 6 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 7. Okay, so it's down here in case you can't see it. Okay, and you can use your graphing calculator to check this out to make sure that it's correct. And when you do, you see that it is correct. All right. So give one a try on your own now. Turn the video off on pause and give it a try. All right, I hope you didn't find this one too difficult. So this says to solve the equation. So whenever you see a question that says solve the equation, we're most likely looking for something that says x equals something. All right, and we're looking for a constant to x equal. So the very first thing we want to do is add 20 to both sides because we want x to equal something. So we want to get our x by itself. So let's get rid of our 20. All right, so add 20 to both sides. All right, so now we have 4x squared equals 25. Okay, we still don't have our x by itself, like our ultimate goal. Okay, so let's go ahead and divide both sides by 4 now. All right, so when we divide both sides by 4, look what we end up getting. Okay, x squared equals 25 divided by 4. So we're getting close. We have x squared, but we want to have just plain x. Okay, so what we can do is take the square root of both sides. So we're going to square root both sides. And now look at this fraction. Don't be scared of it. Just you can square the top and the bottom just like that. Okay, that's the same thing as one big radical sign, or you could do each one separately, and I prefer to do each one separately because it'll make it a little easier for you. Okay, so what we have here is once we square our x squared, we end up with x, and here we're going to end up with the square root of 25 is 5, and the square root of 4 is 2. But don't forget, we're going to have plus or minus. Okay, so let's look at that. So x equals plus or minus square root of 25 over plus or minus square root of 4. And when we simplify it, we end up with x equals plus or minus 5 over 2. All right. And of course, then we can check it with your graphing calculator, put those numbers in there, and you'll find out that that's correct. Try another one on your own. Put the video on pause and give it a try. Okay, once again, it says to solve the equation. Now notice again that we want to solve for x equals something. So let's not worry about this term here right now for just a minute. Let's just see if we can factor this. Okay, so what I want to do is I'm going to draw my x, and I'm going to say I need to find two numbers. Here's, I'm going to put my C number on the top and B on the bottom. I want to find two numbers that multiply together to get 16, add together to get 8. So I'm going to start thinking of factors of 16. 1 times 16, does that add together to get 8? No, it doesn't. I know 2 times 8 is also 16, but that doesn't get add together to get 8. I also know 4 times 4 is 16. Aha, yes, 4 plus 4 equals 8. 4 times 4 equals 16. So I know that I've got a 4 and a 4 here. So in order to do this, I'm going to say x and open another parentheses and say x. And then I'm going to say plus 4 and plus 4. So I can see that the first thing I want to do is factor the perfect square trinomial, which we just did. Okay, and notice x plus 4 times x plus 4 is the same as x plus 4 squared equals 49. All right, so we're getting close. Remember, I wanted to say x equal, and right now I have my x plus 4 and it's squared, so we need to deal with that little square there. And the way we do that is we're going to take the square root of both sides. Okay, so x plus 4, now I've gotten rid of my little square, equals plus or minus square root of 49. And now we're doing a lot easier, so let's go ahead and subtract our 4 from both sides, minus 4, and put a minus 4 over here. All right, so we end up with x equals negative 4 plus or minus square root of 49. Now 49 can be simplified, so we end up with x equals negative 4 plus or minus 7. So the way I ended up with this negative 11, I said negative 4 plus 7 equals 3. So there's my 3. And we'll say negative 4 minus 7, that's plus a negative, so that's negative 11. Equals negative 11. So there's our two answers. Actually, we don't just have one. We have two. X equals negative 11 and x equals 3. And so we could say that, and x equals 3. So now we have it written out the way we want it to be. Okay, and again, you can use your graphing calculator to prove out that you. All right, if a quadratic expression of the form x squared plus bx cannot model a square, you can add a term to form a perfect trinomial. This is called completing the square. All right, and so let's just remember, if we have an equation that's equal, if we add something to one side, let's say we put it on 3, as long as we add it to the other side and it'll keep our equation equal or balanced. All right, so just remember, you can do something on one side as long as you do it on the other side. So let's see how to complete the square. So what we're going to do, when we have x squared plus bx, if we take our b term, divide it by 2, and then square that, that's going to be really helpful to us. So let's see what we can do. So let's say we have x squared plus 6x, and we need to add something on this side to make a perfect square. Well, what we do is we take this b term, 6, and we're going to divide it by 2. So 6 divided by 2 equals 3, and 3 squared equals 9. So if I add 9 now, you can see what two numbers multiply together to get 9, add together to get 6, well, I know that it's 3. 3 times 3 equals 9. 3 plus 3 equals 6. So now I can make a perfect square. And just in a minute, we're going to move on and show that you have to, if you add 9 on this side, we have to add a 9 on the other side. Okay, but this piece right here is really, really important. So if you need to take notes and want to turn your video off for just a second, go ahead and do that. It's take your b, divide it by 2, and then square it. All right, let's do an example to look at it. Okay, so here's an example. Complete the square for the expression. Now, right now, we're not trying to solve for x. We're just going to try and complete the square as a practice problem. So, first of all, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at this x squared plus 14. So, we're going to take our b term right here. And remember, we're going to take the b, divide it by 2, and then we're going to square it. Okay, so b happens to be a negative 14. So we're going to say negative 14 divided by 2 equals 7 instead of negative 7. But when we square that, we actually get 49. So if we add 49 to this side right here, then now I can say, okay, what two numbers multiply together to get 49 and add together to get negative 14? Well, that happens to be negative 7 times negative 7, which was right here. All right, so to factor this, I'm going to say x and my x, and I'm going to say minus 7 minus 7. Okay, so in the end, I have x minus 7 squared. All right. And then we can take that x minus 7 and we can go back and FOIL it. X minus 7 times x minus 7, just to check. X times x, remember FOIL is the first term, so that's x squared. X times negative 7 is plus a negative 7x. Negative 7 times x is plus another negative 7x. And then negative 7 times negative 7 is positive 49. So we end up with x squared minus 14x plus 49 right here. We've completed the square, and it's the exact same as what we had before. All right, and there it is. Okay, let's try this next one. It says complete the square for the expression. Again, we're not trying to solve for anything. We're just practice completing the square. So let's just get started with that. First of all, we want to take our b term, and remember, we're going to say b over 2 squared. So our b is 9 over 2. We're going to square that, equals 81 over 4. So we're going to add 81 over 4 to our equation. So now what we want to do is figure out what our binomial squared is. So let's figure out two numbers that multiply together to get 81 over 4, add together to get 9. Well, we know it's going to be 9 over 2 because we just made that happen. So we're going to say 9 over 2, 9 over 2. So to write our factored form, we're going to say x plus 9 over 2 times x plus 9 over 2. All right, and I'm just going to go ahead and FOIL this out just so you can prove it out that this is correct. Okay, so we say x times x is x squared plus x times 9 over 2 is 9 over 2x plus 9 over 2 times x again, 9 over 2x, plus 9 over 2 times 9 over 2 is 81 over 4. Okay, so when we add this together, 9 over 2 plus 9 over 2, 9 over 2 plus 9 over 2 equals 18 over 2, which equals 9. So we have x squared plus 9x plus 81 over 4. And that's going to equal x plus 9 over 2 squared. And that's our binomial squared. All right, try this one on your own. Turn the video off and give it a try. Okay, hope you didn't find that too difficult. So the first thing we're going to do is take a look at our b. Remember, it's going to be b over 2 squared. All right, so our b is 4. 4 over 2, that equals 2, and 2 squared equals 4. So we're going to add 4. All right, so now it's pretty easy. What two numbers multiply together and multiply together to get 4 and add together to get 4? Well, that's this term right here, 2. So we can say x plus 2 times x plus 2. I'm going to go ahead and FOIL it out just to prove it out that it's true. This is x squared plus 2x plus 2x plus 4. All right, so that's x squared plus 4x plus 4, and that's what I had right here. Okay, so I know that my binomial squared is going to be x plus 2 squared. Okay, try this one on your own. Turn the video off and give it a try. All right, I hope that this one looked very similar. It was very similar to the last problem. The only difference is that now we have plus a negative 4. So this time we're going to take our b over 2 and square it. So we have negative 4 over 2, which equals negative 2. And when we square that, we get positive 4. So we're going to add 4 here, but this time when we factor, it's going to be x minus 2 times x minus 2. All right, so to FOIL that and check and make sure, we have x squared plus x times negative 2 is a negative 2x plus a negative 2x plus a positive 4. All right, so we have x squared minus or plus a negative 4x plus 4. This term is the same as our original term, so we know we did it right. So our answer is going to be x minus 2 squared. All right, one more for you to try on your own. Turn the video off and give it a try. Okay, once again, we want to say, figure out what our next term is going to be. So we're going to say b over 2 squared. My b is a 3, so I'm going to say 3 over 2 squared. 3 over 2 squared is the same as 9 over 4. Don't get frightened by these improper fractions, just go with them. Okay, so we're going to add 9 over 4. 9 over 4. All right, so now I need to factor this out, and I'm going to say, okay, what number multiplies together to get 9 over 4, adds together to get 3? 9 over 4, 3. Well, I happen to know, just from right here, it's going to be 3 over 2. All right, so I'm going to say x plus 3 over 2 times x plus 3 over 2. All right, and just to FOIL it, just to make sure that we got it right, x times x is x squared plus 3 over 2x plus another 3 over 2x plus 3 times 3 is 9 over 4. 2 times 2 is 4. Okay, so 3 over 2 plus 3 over 2 equals 6 over 2, which equals 3. So we're going to say x squared plus 3x plus 9 over 4. And that's the same as what my original equation was, so I know I did it right. So my answer is going to be x plus 3 over 2 squared. Don't worry about getting into improper fraction or proper fractions or simplest terms or decimals. Just go with the fractions just the way they are. You can complete the square to solve quadratic equations. So these are the steps you're going to do. First of all, you're going to collect the variable terms on one side of the equation and the constants on the other. Because remember, when we're solving a problem, we're going to say x equals some constant, all right? As needed, you're going to divide both sides to make a coefficient of the x squared term 1. We're going to complete the square by adding b over 2 squared to both sides of the equation. Then we're going to factor the variable expression as a perfect square. Then we're going to take the square root of both sides of the equation, and finally we're going to solve for the values of the variable. So if you want to turn the video off and write these down or take a picture of it or whatever, you're welcome to do that, and we'll move on. Okay, so let's try this example and see how it works out for us. It says solve the equation by completing the square. So the first thing we want to do is have our variables on one side and our constants on the other, because remember, eventually we want to end up being able to say x equals something. Okay, so let's get our variables on this side. And what I see here is that I've got a 12x, and I want to move it over to get it with my x squared. So I'm going to subtract 12x from both sides, minus 12x. And so when I do that, I end up with x squared minus 12x. I'm going to leave a little room here, equals negative 20. Okay, so I need to find something to go in here. So I'm going to take my b term, which is negative 12. So I'm going to say negative 12 divided by 2. And that equals negative 6, and now I'm going to square that, which equals 36. Okay, so I'm going to add 36 to this side, and I'm also going to add 36 to the other side, because if I add something to one side of my equation, in order to keep it equal, I have to add it to the other side of the equation. So now let's deal with this side first. Negative 20 plus 36 is a positive 16. So we got that side taken care of. Now let's factor this piece, okay? And it says x squared, so I'm going to make my big X. I'm going to say two numbers that multiply together to get 36, add together to get negative 12. All right, well, I happen to know, because we've done this problem already, and because I look over here, it's going to be negative 6 and negative 6, because negative 6 times negative 6 is a positive 36. Negative 6 plus a negative 6 is a negative 12. So when I factor this out, I'm going to have x minus 6 times x minus 6. Okay, so what I actually have, and I'm not going to go ahead and FOIL it out for you. We're just going to trust that this is right. X minus 6 squared equals 16. Remember, my ultimate goal is to say x equals something, and I'm not quite there yet, but I know that I can square both sides, and that's going to leave me with x minus 6 equals square root of 16. But remember, it's plus or minus. Okay, so let's keep on simplifying. We still have our x over here, so let's get rid of this 6. So let's add 6 to both sides. So I'm going to have x equals, and add 6 to this side, 6 plus or minus square root of 16, which I know is 4. So my answer is going to be x equals 6 plus 4, which is 10, and x equals 6 minus 4, which is 2. So here is my final answer. X can equal 10 or x can equal 2. Let's try this example together. Solve the equation by completing the square. So when we see the word solve, that tells us that what we're looking for is, we're going to be looking for x equals some constant. So this is our goal here, is to get x equals something. So the first thing I want to do when I see this is go ahead and rewrite it just a little bit so it's closer to our standard form. So I'm going to just say 3x squared plus 18x. And I'm going to go ahead and put in my plus something, is going to equal 45. So the first thing I see when I look at this is I have a 3 as my coefficient in front of my x squared, and I really want that to be a 1. So I'm going to go ahead and just divide everything by 3 and get that taken care of. Okay, so what I'm going to end up with is x squared plus 6x plus some number is going to equal 15. Okay. So now that I have that, it's a little bit easier. I need to figure out what this number is going to be so I can complete the square. So I'm going to remember it's b over 2 squared, okay, and my b is 6 over 2 equals 3. 3 squared equals 9. So I'm going to add 9 to both sides here. Okay, so now that I have 9 added to both sides, I can go ahead and write my factored out equation. Two numbers that multiply together to get 9, add together to get 6, we know is 3. So x plus 3 times x plus 3. And we know that's going to say x plus 3 squared equals 15 plus 9, which is 24. All right, I'm almost reached my goal, but I still need to get x equals, and I have it squared. So let's go ahead and take the square root of both of those. That's going to give me x plus 3 equals square root of 24, and that's a plus or a minus. Okay, so we're almost there. Let's just go ahead and subtract our 3 from both sides. And that would leave us with x equals negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 24. And actually, square root of 24 is the same as square root of 4 times the square root of 6. And square root of 4, I know, is 2. So my final answer is going to be x equals negative 3 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 6. And that's our final answer. X equals negative 3 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 26. Try this one on your own. Turn the video off and give it a try. Okay, so you had to think a little bit about this one. We need to get our variables all on the same side because our ultimate goal is going to be x equals something. All right, so let's move our 9x to the other side. So we're going to subtract 9x from both sides, minus 9x. And so that's going to give me x squared minus 9x. Now I still have this plus a negative 2 here. So if I add 2 to both sides, then that's going to be helpful too. So I'm going to say equals 2 over here. I'm going to leave something blank in here. Okay, so what's going to go in there? Well, I'm going to take that b term, which is 9. I'm going to say 9 divided by 2 squared. 9 times 9 is 81. 2 times 2 is 4. We've seen one like this before. So we're going to add 81 over 4 to both sides. You've got to do it to both sides now, okay, because it's an equation and we have to keep it equal. Okay, so what 9x, okay, so, I missed out this negative sign here. So let's keep that in place here. So two numbers that multiply together to get 81 over 4, add together to get negative 9, I know is going to be negative 9 over 2. So I'm going to say x minus 9 over 2 times x minus 9 over 2 equals, it's going to equal 2 plus 81 over 4. All right, well, let's get a common denominator. 4 over 2, let's see, it's got to be 8 over, let's fix that. 8, this is my common denominator, so 8 over 4, and 8 over 4 is the same as 2, plus 81 over 4, which is 89 over 4. All right, so all of that is going to equal 89 over 4. Okay, so now what we do is we can just say x minus 9 over 2 squared equals 89 over 4. All right, well, I don't have my x all the way by itself, and I have a little square there, so I'm going to square root both sides. All right, so I have x minus 9 over 2 equals square root of 89 over, and I know square root of 4 is 2. So I'm just going to go ahead and write that in, and this is a plus or minus. Okay, so I still don't have my x all the way by itself. I have a minus 9 over 2, so I'm going to undo that by adding 9 over 2 to both sides, plus 9 over 2. So in the end, I have x equals 9 over 2 plus or minus square root of 89 over 2. Okay, and I could also actually write it like this. X equals 9 plus or minus square root of 89 over 2. and this answer is your final answer right here. Okay, I hope you were able to get that one. It's a little bit tricky. Try another one on your own. Turn the video off and give it a try. Okay, so I hope you were able to get that. Let's see, we've already got our variables on one side and our number on the other. And remember, our ultimate goal is x equals a constant. So again, I can divide everything by 3 here. And I'm going to go ahead and do that and make my life a lot easier. 3 over 3 is 1, so that's going to be x squared. Negative 24 over 3 is plus a negative 8x. I'm going to add something in here, and that's going to equal 27 divided by 3 is 9, and we're going to add something else to that there. Okay, so what is that number going to be? Well, let's take our negative 8, which is our b. We're going to say negative 8 divided by 2, and that equals negative 4. But we have to square that. Negative 4 equals 16. Okay, so we're going to add 16 to both sides. All right, so now when I've factored this, I'm looking for two numbers that multiply together to get 16, add together to get negative 8, and I know it's going to be my negative 4. So I'm going to say x minus 4 times x minus 4 equals 9 plus 16 is 25. Okay, so now I have x minus 4 squared equals 25. I haven't gotten to where I want to be. I want to be at x equals something. And I see this little square here, so I can go ahead and put the square root on both of those. And I get x minus 4 equals plus or minus 5, because I know square root of 25 is 5. So now I don't have x quite by itself yet. I want it to be all by itself. So I'm going to add 4 to both sides plus 4. So I end up having x equals 4 plus or minus 5. So in the end, I have x equals 4 plus 5, which is 9. And x equals 4 minus 5, which is a negative 1. So here's my final answer. Recall the vertex form of a quadratic function that you learned in lesson 5.1. Okay, and it just says f of x equals a times x minus h squared plus k. And so that tells us that the vertex is at h and k. So this is our x and this is our y. So you can complete the square to rewrite any quadratic function in vertex form. So let's do a Okay, so let's try this example. It says write the function in vertex form and identify its vertex. Okay, well, let's remember what our vertex form is. It says f of x equals ax minus h squared plus k. So there's our goal that we want to solve for. So let's go ahead and what I want to do first is I'm going to just say for right now f of x equals 0, okay, because I want you to just keep on following the same format. So we actually have x squared plus 16x minus 12, and we're just going to say equals 0 for right now. Okay, so let's go ahead and get our variables on one side and our constants on the other, just like before. So we're going to say x squared plus 16x, but I'm going to add 12 to both sides, plus 12. Okay, and so that's going to equal 12 over here. I'm going to leave a little spacing here. All right, and so now what I want to do is figure out what I'm going to put in here. So I'm going to look at my b, which is 16. So I'm going to say 16 divided by 2 equals 8, and 8 squared equals 64. Okay, so I'm going to add 64 to both sides. All right, plus 64 plus 64. So now I'm going to go ahead and factor this out, and I want to find two numbers that multiply together to get 64, add together to get 16, and I know that it's going to be 8. So x plus 8, there it is. So that's going to give us x plus 8 squared equals 76. Okay, so now what I want to do is I'm almost there. I have my x minus h squared, and I just need this little piece here. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and change back to my f of x form. f of x equals, and I had a positive 76 here, so let's just subtract 76 from both sides. Okay, so I have f of x equals, let me write this a little further down. Okay, f of x equals x plus 8 squared minus 76. And now I have it in my vertex form. All right, so I can tell you that my x is going to be, what number plus 8 gets me to 0? It's going to be negative 8. All right, and my y is going to be negative 76. So my vertex is going to be negative 8, negative 76. And that's your answer. All right. And you can use the axis of symmetry if you want to figure out that you're correct. So negative 8 and negative 76, and it's correct. All right, this one says write the function in vertex form and identify its vertex. So remember, our vertex form is f of x equals a x minus h squared plus k. All right, so let's see what we can do here. So let's rewrite this 3x squared minus 18x plus something, and let's move our 7 to the other side, equals negative 7 plus something. Okay, so what is that something going to be? Well, first of all, let's notice that I have this 3 with my x squared, and I really don't want it, so I'm going to factor a 3 out of this side here. I'm going to say 3x squared minus 18, oops, not 18, 6. So I'm going to factor that out. Minus 6x, all right, and then plus something equals negative 7 plus something. Okay, so what is this something going to be? Well, let's take a look at it. Negative 6x is actually negative 6 divided by 2 equals negative 3. Negative 3 squared is 9, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and put a 9 in here, but notice this is really 9 times 3, which is 27. Okay, so I need to also actually add a positive 27 over here. All right, because I factored that 3 out for a little bit. So when I actually added, I didn't actually add a 9 here, I added a 27. Okay, so I have to put my 27 over here. So now I have two numbers that multiply together to get 9, add together to get negative 6 is a negative 3. So x minus 3 squared. And over here I have a 20 on this other side. But I'm going to subtract 20 from both sides, minus 20. All right. And so now I have my new function, f of x equals 3 times x minus 3 squared minus 20. So there it is written in vertex form. My vertex is going to be a negative 3, or actually a positive 3, because, oh no, yeah, because it's written in that form. Positive 3, and my y is going to be negative 20. All right. And let's see. And on this one, we could go ahead and check. We could simplify it. There's all sorts of different ways we could go to check. You could use your calculator to check. Okay, so this Bible verse reminded me of the lesson we were talking about, and I am sure of this, that he who began a good work in you will bring it to completion at the day of Jesus Christ. So I was thinking about completing the square. I just thought about that Jesus is going to complete everything in us in his own time. So fear not and just have faith. All right, hope you have a great day, and I'll talk to you in class. See you soon. Bye.